Hey, Colin, welcome to the Hidden Why podcast. Great to have you here today.
Thank you, Lee, and thanks for the opportunity.
Fairly local down there in Melbourne,
Yes.
a couple of
Well,
thousand kilometers away.
yeah, fairly local in an Australian context,
Yes, that's
because
right.
I was living in London earlier this year, uh, and people just traveling 1 hour for them is like a big deal. And I've got to go to Leicester by train. Oh, it's such a big trip. What do you mean? It's a 1 hour train ride, but they see this as a vast distance. So in Australia, we have a different perspective.
Absolutely. You're from London or?
No, no, I'm originally from South Africa.
That's
Born
the
and
accent,
born and
yes.
raised there. So you might hear a hint of my accent.
Yeah.
The, but that was many, many years ago. So I was born in the 1950s. So that makes me officially old, and grew up in a military dictatorship. I mean, the apartheid government was a minority white government. When I say minority, only white people could vote. And of that, the Afrikaans population, which made up about 60%, basically controlled government. And
Mm.
yeah, and when you grow up in that sort of environment, you normalize it. You go, well, that's how the world is.
Yeah, right.
Until I left. Yeah. So it was an interesting childhood.
Okay. Tell us a bit about what your work is and what you're doing before we get into your book, because you've got a really, well, I find it very intriguing, your new book, and want to get into that for sure. But tell us a bit about your background so that'll lead us into the book.
Well, I'm an educator. I think I knew my calling to be an educator from a very early age. I went to a boarding school in South Africa and discovered that the workers at the school, the Zulu workers, um, most of them were illiterate. And I approached the headmaster and I was so shocked by this. I mean, I couldn't believe that adults couldn't read and write. And he explained how the apartheid system keeps people undereducated as a way of controlling population groups. And so we established a literacy training program at the school, and I was the teacher. And so, like you,
Wow.
you're in background as an English teacher. I was a literacy teacher from the age of 14. And when I left South Africa, I had to leave because I was in trouble with the police. I was an anti-apartheid activist leader, uh, and eventually washed up on the shores of Australia. It took me about 8 years trying to find out what I wanted to do before I established myself as an educator at the age of 30. And I've been doing that now for the last 36 years.
Okay.
Um,
When
yeah.
you say you sort of knew that was your calling from early age, is that just because of the background with the school there and your role there, or what was it that?
It was a combination of two things. Excuse me. There's a combination of two things. One was seeing a really good teacher in action. And we had the wonderful experience of a contrast because we had this crappy biology teacher who just didn't give a stuff about what he was doing. And we all hated biology. We were teenagers. And then he was fired or whatever, he disappeared. And then the new teacher arrived. And from the moment she walked through the door, it was transformative. You could just see that she immediately not only got all our attention, she turned biology from the least favorite to the most favorite. And and I remember after several weeks going up to her name was Miss Knight, as it's in the forward of the book, and she explained, no, it's about method. It's not what you teach, it's how you teach. And so
Right.
when I went into the literacy training stuff, I thought, okay, it's not what, it's how.
Yeah.
And that became my absolute passion was looking at the methodology that underpins all communication, including education.
Yeah. Wow. So your work now primarily focuses around obviously educating, but in the realms of leadership and um, in the workplace.
Yeah, so most of our clients are Fortune 500 companies,
Yeah.
which unfortunately leaves me working most of the time in Europe, Middle East, and US. I'm off to Munich next week. So I do an enormous amount of travel, but we work mainly with the C-suite of major corporations. So
Right.
examples would be Google, would be SAP, British Petroleum, ExxonMobil, L'Oreal, and so on. And we work with senior executive teams in alignment, how to get that group of people working collaboratively in an aligned way so that it can benefit the rest of their organization. And it seems like such a weird thing to say, alignment at a C-suite. It's a warfare in most of these executive teams. There's so much ego politics,
I was going to say, I
dynamics
could
that,
imagine a lot of power and ego and
yeah, and these are super successful, incredibly smart, and often very wealthy people. And so their willingness to compromise is not in their nature. And yet that's the key to being able to run a really powerful organization, is to have that integration of disparate voices, but aligned in focus. And so we do a lot of work there. Um, the rest of our work, and we have a big team of people, is around communication capability across all sorts of functions. So sales organizations, um, the support functions within organizations, risk, finance, HR, etc. And we also work with grads, people that are now starting their careers. And we run major grad programs, particularly in Australia, across with the financial services sector. So yeah, it's a whole gamut of stuff we do.
okay. And why did you? I know you sort of gave me a little bit of a backstory of why you wrote the book because you're feeling the pressure. Everyone's asking you for a book, but what made you write this particular book? How to influence anyone, anywhere, anytime?
One of our core areas of focus is this notion of influence.
Right.
And when you start to ask the question, what is it? You know, what is influence?
Mm, mm.
Well, it achieves four things. It's a way of being able to assist or guide people in the way that they feel about things. If you look at what's happening in the United States politics at the moment, it's not rational, right? We've got Donald Trump and we've got Kamala Harris, and the entrenchment in those various camps are not based on any logic or data or information. It's how they feel. And the emotional attachment to things can be found in all sorts of different contexts. I'm not a big follower of sport, but I have been to a few sporting things.
Yeah, right.
And I just get astounded by the passion of followers of teams.
Mm,
And their whole identity is invested in this group of people moving a ball around a field. And it's a level of passion you just don't see almost anywhere else
yeah,
because they feel it, right? It's a feeling. So influence is feeling. Then how do you change the way people think? Then how do you move that to behavior? And then finally to commitment. So it's how you feel, think, what you do, and what you commit to. And a person that can influence effectively does all four of those things. And we've been doing that work for years and years and years. And often we get asked, do you have a book? And I never have. It's a program that we have. It's a program of work. It's a process that you go through. It's not something you kind of read. Um, However, there was not a lot of pressure. A publisher approached us and kept knocking on the door. And then finally, I said, okay, let me see if it can be done. And so I did, and we turned it into, this book.
yeah,
And um, it was an interesting process to try and write what is a dynamic experience into what essentially is static on a page, but to try and create that same immediacy, that same experience.
yeah. I
And it's
like it.
been, yeah, the publisher was happy, the editors were great, and yeah, and it's been a fantastic response in the marketplace. So we thrilled and a little bit surprised, but it's great.
No, look, it's congratulations first of all. I think it's great for someone with your immense background and what you've done to be able to put that down in paper and share it with people is a big gratitude to you. Um, Going back to influence, so this idea of influence is to tap into, I suppose, how people want to feel, and then to be able to encourage change in the way they think, therefore their behavior, and then that engagement piece too, or the action piece. Is that
Mm,
sort of a good summary?
that sums it up perfectly. I was watching one of the videos you posted on your LinkedIn about discipline and
Yeah.
the Navy SEALs discipline. That's the commit piece, and that's where a lot of people fall down. I mean, we all know what to do. I mean, we all know what constitutes a good diet. We all know that we need to exercise. I mean, we don't have a content problem in our world. We have the content is there for everybody.
Yeah.
If you want to be a brilliant leader, go and Google how to be a brilliant leader, and they'll give you everything you want to know about how to lead. Turning that into behavior and then turning that into sustained commitment, that's hard.
Mm.
And that's the part of our work is to create the conditions for success.
Right.
And yeah, that's the approach.
Okay, that's interesting. Do you feel that you're a natural leader or a person that has this ability to influence somewhat innately? I mean, you said you're an activist. Um, does that have something to do with your background there as well?
When I watched the very good teacher, Miss Knight, do her work, the education at that time was so profound. What I noticed was if you're going to be effective as a communicator or educator or an
Yeah.
influencer, it always starts with the person or the group that you're seeking to influence. It's not about you. It's not what you want them to do. It's how to lead them into a realization that this might be a really good choice and option. So it's not imposing, it's leading or guiding is the approach. As a When I was a university student in South Africa, I don't know how to describe it, Lee. The government had complete control. Phones were tapped. Police had complete authority to do anything, including kill. And as an activist student, we took our lives. Our lives were at risk in doing what we did because we were so vulnerable to being arrested. And you could be arrested on the flimsiest pretense. And they called it Section 6 of the Terrorism Act, where you could be arrested and locked up for 6 months without being charged. 6 months.
Wow.
And then they would release you and then rearrest you under the same act for another 6 months. So you could be perpetually in prison without being charged or going in front of a court or a trial. But one of the things we noticed was if we were going to, in those very fraught and dangerous environments, awaken consciousness, like get people to see the horrors of what apartheid was, we had to be very sophisticated in our communication. So we spent a lot of time thinking about language, how we would word something so it could be disguised influence. In other words, we weren't coming out going down with the government. I mean, what we were doing is starting to say, imagine a world that could. So we weren't being oppositional. We were trying to lead towards possibility. And, all of those experiences at that early age laid the foundation for how we now approach to our work in corporate sector.
Yeah, okay. I mean, it's a methodology that you use, right? And this is what
Yes,
you've basically written, which you say it's very dynamic. Dynamic in the sense that it's, excuse me, very contextual as to how you're applying that methodology, because I assume it's in a book now. It seems like maybe to you it doesn't feel like it's a method. Obviously now it maybe does because you've written it down. But from my perspective, I assume this process is a fairly methodological approach to influence of anyone in getting them to make a change that they desire and getting them to see that change. And that could be in the work setting or the personal setting.
exactly. Let me give you an example. If you go to a lot of corporate presentations or how business is conducted, right, a lot of it's driven off PowerPoint slides. People go and sit in a meeting, someone puts up a slide, they then start yapping away around what that slide is. It's usually filled with content and data. It may or may not have relevance or meaning, but there's lots of content being exchanged in most meeting environments.
Mm.
So we asked the question, how effective is that? And what's the intention and purpose of it? So we've got a method on how to approach it. We had one of our alumni, Judith, originally from Shanghai, came to Melbourne as a student and got onto a grad program with one of the major banks. Really smart young woman. She got a master's degree here in Melbourne University. Was with the bank for about 6 years, and her rise through the ranks was rapid. And then she had a chance to talk to the executive committee about a big project where they were looking for $15 million of capital investment, right? It's a big deal. And so there she is. She's 30 years old. She's walking in front of the CEO and all the big, heavy dudes, heavy, and I say dudes advisedly, uh, and she knew our methodology. So instead of doing, hi, my name's Judith, and I'm going to talk to you today about the upcoming project in regards to blah, 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 she started with a story. It was a story that involved a coffee cup and a coffee that she had bought from a local coffee shop that most of the people within the room would have known, because it was literally across the road from their head office. And she was talking about how frustrated the coffee owner was with their touch and go technology, where you tap your tap and go card technology. And that story created enough. Not only was it surprising that she started with a story, all the exco didn't quite know what to do. She didn't have a slide up or anything. And she just stated the customer problem, but in a searingly powerful way that was almost accusatory, saying, I mean, you talk about customer all the time. Do you really mean it? And then she came to the solution, came to the recommendation, and was very clearly linked. And then she came to the ask, which was 15 million. Not one slide. She stood there. The whole thing took 12 minutes. And in 12 minutes, she got $15 million worth of funding.
Yeah.
And, and because she followed a methodology, it was a structure. Most people communicate by going into their kitchen of their mind, grabbing any ingredients and chucking it into a pot and hoping something miraculous will pop out. They don't follow recipes. And communication is like, a good communication is following recipes of structure and design and then delivery that work. It's as simple as that. And
Right.
but it's counterintuitive for a lot of people. It feels strange when you first start using it, but man, the impact is incredible.
Well, you sort of know, like I listen to a lot of, I guess, speakers, on stage, and
Yeah.
I resonate with some more deeply than others, but that's because they sort of align with how I feel about the world. But watching them and their approach to speaking too, the really good ones, you can clearly see that they have this structure and method of delivery that makes them more powerful than some others.
And that decision, in terms of how powerful they are, can often be made in the first 3 or 4 seconds. Just how they walk onto the stage gives you information. Um, I did a lot of analysis on the methodology of comedy. What makes something funny? Why do people laugh? And so I went to a lot of comedy stores to watch comedians and to see their method. And it was amazing to me that some comedians would walk out and people would laugh before they got to the microphone. There was just something energetically, there was like maybe a sort of naughtiness, or there was a vibe, or a super confidence. That was also a factor. Then some would walk out onto the stage and immediately you could feel the audience turn off. The person hadn't even started yet because they looked so petrified, or they got pity rather than laughs. And so we start to think about, okay, one of the methods that you've got to work on is how do you walk into a room? And I know it seems such an odd thing to say, but we've all experienced it. You're in a room, maybe a crowded room, and you meet and greeting people, and somebody walks in, and your first thought is, who are they? There's just something about their demeanor. There's something in their posture, their gait, that does this. We were working with a CEO, Gail Kelly, the first female CEO of banks in Australia. She was the CEO of Westpac. She's a tall woman. She's about close to 6 foot. And one of the things that she shared with me was this idea of how she walks down corridors. And as a CEO, she knows people are watching her, right? They're queuing off her. And so she walked with pace. She always walked with speed. And it became quite famous because people said, you've got to keep up with Gail, keep up with Gail. You've got to be able to walk like Gail. And what she was conveying was urgency. We can't waste time. We've got to be deliberative. And she just did that in her walk. And so when she walked into a room, in her words, I never walked into a room, I arrived. And it wasn't arrogance. It was to say, I'm here, there's value now. I bring value. And that's before she's even said a word. So that's method. That's a methodology.
So in body language alone.
Think about these things that we have hanging off the ends of our arms, right? Our hands.
Yeah.
And when you when people are they're talking, they will often do this. So let's think about the future. Let's think about where they're going, and they will point to their future. Now, in this case, they're pointing to their right. So I'm going, here's the future. Now, that's not your future. Your future is on your right. So if I'm communicating to someone, I'll say, okay, let's talk about where we're going and what the next steps will be. And I will point backwards for me. I'm going counterintuitively in my direction, but it's appropriate for you. So on a stage, I'm constantly mirroring the audience's point of view. So I'll be always thinking about, all right, let's move towards where we are going, and then I'll use my hand to move up. So there's a curve, and this says, okay, so let's see where our growth opportunities are.
Yeah.
And that unconsciously makes sense. They go, oh, yeah, I can see that. And I'm just using my gestures to help in organizing a map in their minds that intuitively connects with their use of time.
Yeah.
Now, most 98% of people don't know that. So that they always
No,
do.
well,
All
you
right,
wouldn't
what's
think of it,
next?
would you? Like to try and think of delivering a speech and then using the opposite hand from
Yeah.
what you wouldn't naturally use. Yeah, it's
So right there is method, right? If you say, look, there's three things we're going to talk about, first, second, and third, and you lay them out in a sequence across a timeline and in space, or you physically walk, then people know what those three things are. But you'll see people do this. All right, there's three things we're going to talk about. We're going to focus on the strategy, then we're going to come up with a detailed plan for everybody, and then we're going to work out what the roles are. So let's start off with the strategy. It's like just a blur of words. But if I say there's three things we're going to focus on. First, strategy. Understand exactly what we're doing. From that, we then distill a plan. And the plan needs to be directly relevant to you and your team. And then finally, roles. What are the roles that people play in the fulfillment of the plan that meets the strategy? So it's strategy, plan, roles. Everyone's got it.
yeah.
So I've slowed down, I've used gestures, I've emphasized, and I've used the power of the pause to separate each of the elements.
Mm.
That's methodology.
Yeah.
And if you didn't know that, you can just chuck stuff away. No one hears it.
Yeah. Geez, there's a lot, obviously, we go into with your knowledge, and that's just a snippet of it. So let's break it down into. You talk about the 3 Ds in how to communicate more effectively. Can we run through those?
Certainly. If you're going to go talk to somebody, right?
Yeah.
And let's say at work, you need to think about why do I need to talk to them? What's the objective of this conversation? And what is going to be the mutual benefit or gain? So what you're doing just in your head very quickly is you're doing something called a diagnostic. You're diagnosing. Now, sometimes this is done in nanoseconds. Oh, I've got to talk to Chris about something. Oh, I need an update on that project stuff. All right, I wonder where Chris is. So you're kind of diagnosing. But if you want to get very deliberative with that first step, that diagnostic step, then there is a structure and a method to it. Once you've diagnosed that, yeah, I have this communication situation, I've got this personal group that I need to communicating to, then I've got to design what I'm going to say and how I'm going to say it. So I've got to put a structure. I just don't want to go in there and wing it. I just want to go under prepared. So I need to design something. So whether I write that down or go through it in my head in some way. And then the moment comes when you are now in communication. And that's the third D, which is delivery. So it's diagnose, design, and deliver. We do this anyway. It's intuitive. You've got to do that. I mean, if you in a meeting and someone says something in your head, you diagnose and analyze what they say. You then will design a response, and then you'll say it. Now, you do that intuitively and quickly. But is it effective? Are you accurate? So what we've done in the book is to drill into each of those.
Yeah.
So what are the steps to a good diagnostic? And one of them is something we've already discussed. What is the outcome from their perspective, from the audience perspective? Yeah.
Often we think about the outcome that we desire, when we walk into any communication situation, and it's natural, I suppose. Part of our evolution is because we're all in this mode of survival. So that's what we're aiming to achieve. To how do we can make our life better?
We're using an AI coach at the moment. So I don't know how familiar you are with AI Developers League, but it's amazing, isn't it? It's incredible. So we've got an AI coach that is being trained in our methodology. So it uses our methodology in verbal exchange in a conversation with someone who wants to practice, let's say, a presentation or a pitch or something. And one of the realities is that the AI coach doesn't have an agenda, it's got no other motivation than apply the methodology. But when human beings talk to other human beings, it's much more complex. Because if you're going in going, oh, I hope I don't upset them. I hope they like me. I hope I make a good impression. Well, this is all distraction from the point of the conversation. Your psychology or your anxiety could inhibit you in being effective. So one of the methods that we focus on is, where do you place attention? And it's got to be off yourself. It's not about you. It's about them. And if they can see the value, experience the value, and understand that what you are asking or requesting or suggesting is in their benefit, for their gain, then they will obviously lift to you. And then you get all the positive outcomes. They'll like you, they'll respect you, and so on. But people go in going, oh, God, I hope they respect me. Well, you've already missed the boat. You've forgotten what the point of the exercise is.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's tricky, man. And as you said, most people do go in with their own agendas. They do go with their own outcomes. They're not focused on their audience. And when I say audience, it could be an audience of one. Could be
one or many, yeah.
Yeah.
So when you look at diagnosis, then you have to look at it from their perspective. Okay, what is it that what outcome are they hoping to achieve? That's what I've got to find.
Yesterday, I ran a masterclass with a group in the United States. So just to give you some idea, and this is going to be visual, but I'll explain what I'm doing. Okay, so in our diagnostic with this group, we print off all their LinkedIn profiles. So let me just come out of blurred background so you can see what I'm talking about. So we go through all their LinkedIn profiles. So I read all their backgrounds. There's 50 people on this course. Where are they located? What roles do they play? What backgrounds do they have? What did they study at university? Work? If they went to college at all? If they've got several languages and so on. So and I've got all of these here, right? So I've gone through every single individual. I've determined and get an insight into where they sit in the organization, even where they're physically located, in what part of the country. And that's diagnostic work. And so what I'm now building is an insight and understanding of who they are. Then I'm now thinking, okay, so we've got a 2-hour masterclass. So what's the outcome from their perspective? What would best benefit them? So now I've got to do research on their organization. What's their current state? What's their performance trajectory? What's their aspiration? How they tracking against that? Their industry. What are the competitors they're dealing with? What are some of the real big obstacles they are facing right now? So that again helps me to understand their real world. And this is the kind of deep diagnostic we do with every single event and session and conversation that we run. And even preparing for our conversation with you, I had a look at your real estate company background. I had a look at your LinkedIn. I saw your books. I watched a few of your videos. So I get to know who you are. So we are having this conversation, but I didn't know who you were, but I did my research. Yeah. And that's diagnostic, which means I can then design a response that's going to fit within your podcast requirements and meet you where you are. And then we can deliver, which I'm doing now, a meaningful and useful conversation for listeners.
We sort of already mentioned where people might go wrong in a diagnosis, and that would be thinking about themselves and not the other person or the audience. what other errors do people make in the diagnosis typically?
They don't spend enough time on relevance.
Yeah.
Simon Sinek, in his famous book, Always Start with Why, is the root of this. Ultimately, everyone has the same question in their minds in most contexts. What's in it for me? You'll see this a lot in organizations. The CEO will stand up and go, we need to be customer obsessed. And the thousands of people in the organization going, why? Why should I be customer obsessed? Well, what's in it for me? I can understand what's in it for the customer, but what's in it for me? So you don't sell customer obsession as a value from a customer point of view. The customer is already going to benefit. How do you sell customer value or customer obsession to an employee's point worldview? And it could be something linked with things like the pride in the work that you do, the effect and benefit you have on people's lives, the contribution that you can make to communities, that the value that you do in the role that you play can have significant consequential effects on people. All right. And so people say there's something around pride, there's something around achievement, there's something about contribution, there's a feeling of that I'm valuable and value. Now it makes sense. So if you're going to talk about customer obsession to a group of employees, make it relevant to the employee, and
Okay.
that's sometimes missed. So the why frame, as we call it, if you don't get the why right, the rest is noise.
They're really understanding their values and how that benefits them.
Yeah.
Or aligns with their values.
What's the gain? What's the pain? Right? If they don't do this, what's the consequence? So you'll see this a lot in politics. Politics leads with pain and fear, right? If you don't vote for me, this will be the consequence, which is really kind of sad, because one of the things that you'll notice with most politicians around the world, they don't articulate compelling visions. People don't believe them. What they can relate to is things that they're afraid of. And that's a why frame. That's why you should vote for me. And most campaigns are all about the why frame. The actual content of their policies and the details of what their plans are almost secondary or irrelevant. That's how powerful a why frame is. And if you don't spend time in the diagnostic on the why, you might waste time on what follows.
You're saying it's important to go in there with the, I guess, the idea of this is, what will happen if you don't go with me idea, the why frame.
Definitely.
Should you still use that, as well as then these are the benefits you'll get and that align with how you feel and your values?
And this is why the diagnostic is so important. What will work? I was working with a union. These were mechanical engineers, very cynical, anti-management, and there was going to be lots of big changes in the industry. And so these engineers were furious. They were just full of rage and super reluctant to accept the changes. So my job was to go in and talk about the changes will be taking place. It's not a matter of if, it's when, and what your response to this could be. And my entire relevance frame was pain, because what they were doing for themselves is they were marginalizing their entire function within the industry, which I'd heard at the CEO table that they were looking at completely outsourcing that function. So in other words, just firing everybody and subcontracting all the mechanical engineering elements to another company, to a supplier. And they weren't aware of this. They thought that all they had to do was they'd fight, and they'd win in the end because they had a track record. So I had to be brutal in saying, this is the current state. Your choice now is whether you're going to live or die. And at the moment, you're heavily weighted in the die side of things, because of the way that you're conducting this process, the attitude and approach that you are taking, the responses that you are making to the changes, and you are putting yourself at existential risk. Get smarter. Get smarter in how you're doing this. Yes, you can still negotiate, but don't negotiate from coming from an opposite. And I got kind of punchy and feisty. And you could see all of them going, "Jeez, we haven't had this before." And I was using, I was using quite strong language and demonstrating to them is like, don't you realize that you're shooting yourselves right now in the behavior that you're doing? So that was a very strong case of fear and negativity. It worked. If I'd said, "Oh, look, we can all create something together. We can work as one team. We can build a great enterprise. We can do something great for our customers," they would all go, "Piss off," right? So you got to do your diagnostic. So sometimes it's a mix. Sometimes it's move things that you don't want, move away. Sometimes move towards. Sometimes it's very focused on the positive, particularly in sales. Salespeople tend to focus because they tend to be competitive. They tend to be optimistic, most of them, and so they'll be excited by the future of the possibility. You can convert, you can hit your number and exceed it by X. Imagine if you could just know every time you step in front of a customer that the likelihood of a yes is going to be improved by 30%. What? Yeah, 30% increase in your in conversions. Imagine taking your average deal size, which you're currently at X, and we could double it within 6 months. Not only will you hit your budget, you can say hello to the Winners Circle Club in Hawaii or whatever it is, and you'll see salespeople getting super excited about that sort of energy. So it depends. Your relevance depends on your diagnostic.
So really, being relatable to your audience, and you're almost using mirroring tactics there. Like with that mechanics situation, obviously you had to come back very abruptly and, with that kind of language you're using to relate to them better.
Exactly.
Yeah. Design part of the process. So you've sort of diagnosed your audience, and now you're designing how you're best going to communicate that to them. Talk us through that.
One of the core elements of our design approach is what we call a logic tree, or something sounds kind of technical, CPD hierarchy. And it's built around a logic structure. So the C is the concept. This is the big idea. We break it down into principles. So these are the 3 or 4 things we're going to focus on. And then under each of the principles, we have details, CPD, concept, principle, detail. Where a lot of people in the way they design is they start with detail.
Yeah.
And that's why you'll see this on slides, right? Someone will put up a Excel spreadsheet and start talking to numbers. And you're going, "Oh, what's this relate to? What's this connected to?" And so in our approach to designing, we start with context before you get into content.
Yeah.
So it's context first, then the content that follows, which then requires a call to action. So set the context, here's the content, here's the call to action. In the mix of this, you've also got to think about connection. How do you connect to your audience? Why would they believe you? Why would they listen to you? What gives you the credibility, the right to talk about this? So as you can see, we have this context setting, but we've also got to build connection and confidence in you as the communicator. That means I will now listen to your content, which means when you have the call to action, I can see the logical flow. And then the final piece in design is close. When you end the communication, what is next? What follows? What's the commitment that follows that? And so we have these 5 C's that are context, connection, content, call to action, close. And those 5 elements are then put into what we have as a 12-step structure. Now, 12 steps sounds like a lot. Think about it though. When someone goes in to do a presentation, they are following some sort of structure. And it might be, okay, good morning, everyone. Thanks very much for being here. I appreciate how busy you are. I'm really happy to be here, and I'm really excited about the topic I'm about to discuss. First slide. Here's the agenda. I'm just going to go through the agenda. Here's the first item is the agenda, which I'm doing now. Then we're going to blah, blah, blah. So they are following a structure. It's just that it's tedious. It's non-audience centered. And you can already see people starting to go, shutting down or going off to their happy place, or worse, going to their devices. So you need something that's going to grab attention. The attention economy is a term that's now used. And getting people's attention is harder than ever before. We live in a scrolling world. Micro attention grabbing things surround us all the time, our devices and so on. We have multiple inputs. I mean, people sit on a screen, watching a screen with another screen in the background. We have multiple screens, all demanding our attention. So as a communicator, how do you get someone's attention? How do you connect? Well, you've got to design that. Today, we have a general manager who's having her all hands with her new team. We've been working on her design for the last week. She's going to be opening with a story. And so she's going to walk on. This is a big team, and 80% don't know who she is. And her opening words are going to be this: 1998, London Stock Exchange. I'm a grad. I've been there for 4 weeks. Then this happened. So that's her opening. I defy anyone in the room not to go, what happened then? What's next? So she's put a date, she's placed a location, she's given her status, and then something's about to happen. That's classic storytelling, right? You're starting with something that's going to grab attention, just like most TV shows do, right? You know, they start with something. Someone's walking down the street. You know, something's going to happen. So what you could have done is walk on, good morning and welcome. Thanks very much for being here, blah, blah, blah. Exactly what everyone expects. So she interrupts the pattern. She grabs attention. And the story is potent. It's a powerful story. And that becomes thematic now throughout the rest of her 30 minutes. She's got 30 minutes to make her first impression as a leader.
Yeah.
And she's going to close with the story, and the elements in between around the content and call to action are there. But we've now partly designed this. She's now been rehearsing with her AI coach, and I got a text this morning just on my way to the office saying, "I'm ready." That's all she had, 2 words: "I'm ready." And I thought, I can't wait to hear the outcome. So she's going to be on stage in a few hours.
Yeah, awesome.
But that's what good design does, right?
Yeah.
And she will become the talk of her organization at the end of this.
Yeah, nice. So really important, diagnose, design. You've sort of talked about some delivery methods there. And again, we're just skimming across the surface, guys. So make sure you grab a copy of the book to delve right into it. I certainly will. Delivery part, obviously very important in how you deliver. And you've sort of shared some ideas on how that can be done. Any other tips or advice that you want to share in that?
So we've talked about physiology, right? So this notion of how you walk into a room, how you stand, posture. You know, even in Zoom or team calls, right? I don't know if you've seen people whose heads are right at the base of their screen as they're trying to communicate, and you're going, no. You need to occupy the screen as much as you can. This is
me adjust mine now. See,
there we go. That's better, right? So the idea is only to have a very small amount of space above your head to the top of the screen, and that allows then your hands to come naturally into play. So that's delivery. That's a technique.
Yeah.
And we've talked about timeline. We've talked about this notion of anchoring things across a timeline. So the whole physiology element is all part of it. The next is a major one. If you ask people, have you heard your voice on a recording or a tape, and were you a little surprised? And most people go, "Oh God, you know, I don't like my voice," or they will react usually in sometimes not necessarily positive way, because we don't know what we sound like. We think we sound like something because we have an internal view of ourselves.
Yeah.
But you know, we were working with a manager again one of the technology companies, and he had a voice like this. It was really up in his nose, and he sort of spoke like this, and he was an Australian, and he had this sort of like a saw, like a type sound, and it was very nasally, very high pitched, and he just had no pauses and breaks. Senior guy, super smart dude, right? Really intelligent bloke, but he was compromised by his voice. In fact, people kind of mocked him about his voice. You know, people would say, "Has anyone seen You know, not even the dignity of a name." And he went to voice coaching.
Yeah.
And he learned how to take his voice from right up in his nose to learn to speak in his mouth. He went from his mouth to learn to speak from his throat. He went from his throat to learn to speak from his chest, and then finally from his abdomen. And so this is skill. Your voice is not just something you're stuck with. It's an instrument you can learn to play.
Yeah.
And if your voice isn't serving you, learn how to use your voice better. You go, oh, I hate my voice. Well, fix it. Find this. You have control.
Yeah.
You can determine at what pace you speak, where you use pauses, what pitch you use. The other thing we find in Australia is the upward inflection at the end of sentences, and people are saying something and you're not quite sure whether it's a question or a statement. I mean, imagine going to a doctor and a doctor says, yeah, we've got your results. It says, looks like you've got cancer. And you're going, what? Do I? Because it's where's the voice? The voice doesn't support the message. And part of your job is to learn to build range with your voice. Learn how to use your voice artfully and deliberately. And we all have very naturally expressive voices, but we tend to squeeze them into formality, particularly in work. So yeah, the voice is the one thing. Then storytelling, and you'll notice even on our podcast today how many stories I've used.
Yeah,
it's been back-to-back stories. I've just used one. Stories are very powerful because they bring the real world into play. So if I give you an example, if I give you a theory, you go, oh, that's interesting. Then I use an example, go, oh, now I see how it works. Now I get it. But storytelling has to be punchy. I mean, we've all heard people that are really crappy storytellers. They go on and on and on and way too much detail, and you're not sure where the hell they are heading. And sometimes they're chemically inspired, which means they're not even conscious of their audience. So stories have to be very precise. They've got to be used super tactically. And you can relieve anxiety with stories. You can provide evidence and proof. You can use stories for relevance, as the story I told earlier around the young woman that's going to be talking to her leadership team today, right? So becoming good with stories. Then people say, well, where do you get your stories from? I mean, look around you. Your life is nothing but story. It's all it is. How did you get to where you are? This is your podcast, Lee. You know, you ask questions around. So how did you get to where you got to? Tell me the story. And then every human encounter has a potential for storytelling.
Yeah, you're right.
I have 4 coffee shops within 50 meters of my office. I only go to one. Why? They don't have the best coffee. The best coffee is another place. This is the second best coffee. So why do I compromise and go for the second best coffee out of the four coffee places? Because the person who works at that coffee place, the way he deals and treats not only customers, but his team is just extraordinary. He's like the embodiment of joy. He's always happy. He's always up, and he's always respectful. And it's just a pleasure to walk in and out of his coffee shop. That's it. So I'm willing to compromise the quality of the product for the quality of the experience.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Yeah, and so what I've just done is used a story. So storytelling can be very, very quick and simple.
Yeah.
And people go, oh, now I get it. But if I say, so the important thing about customers is providing them with a high quality customer service. Be happy, right? It's always good to be joyful. So bloody what? But
What
now I've got.
I find with storytelling, I often lose track of where I'm going with it. Like I lose the intent. Like I've got this, I want to tell this story, but and then I finish up and it's like, what was the fucking point? You know?
Well, now you've hit on methodology with story design,
Yeah, yeah.
because stories have got three
It's
elements. You've got
just,
this, you've got the story, then you've got the point, and then you've got the link. And it's always about the point and link.
yeah,
The story can be anything. In fact, one of the things I sometimes do on stage is I'll say, all right, what's the theme of this conference? And someone will go shout out the theme. I'll say, okay, I need a story that illustrates what this theme means. Can someone give me a story? And some people go, what do you mean? I say, anything. Just a story. Maybe something you did today, this morning with your kids, or maybe something on the weekend. And eventually someone will tell me a story. Oh, on the weekend, I went to Bunnings with my 3 children and we went to blah, 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 this and blah, blah, that. And I say, okay, then I take that story and connect it to the theme of the conference. Why? Because I know how to make a point and link it to the outcome that you're after. If you don't have an outcome in mind, then your story becomes indulgent,
yeah,
or it becomes irrelevant.
yeah,
So it's always about the why use the story. And it's not the story itself, it's the point of the story and the way you link it that is the most powerful. And that's one of the other delivery elements that we include. We also cover stuff on visual aids, how to use slides and so on. And the final one that we put a lot of attention on is energy. Many times when we start a workshop, like I did yesterday, you got 50 people logging on from all across the United States. It's morning for them. It's late night or evening for us. And you could see them coming on, and some of them were coming on with sort of like what we call reluctant compliance, like, oh yeah, I've been told to attend this workshop. So they're already looking half disengaged.
yeah,
You could see some people, they already were working on something else, because you could see them looking at another screen, and whilst the camera was on them, they were doing stuff over here. And I thought, okay, this is interesting energy. So what's the reason that they're here? Right? What have they shown up with? Now, some people were engaged already from the start, but my job was to harvest the energy and get them all focused and attending. And so this is why a start strong in our vernacular is so important. But let's flip it. If I say to people, if you want to be effective, show up with good energy.
mm,
Doesn't matter what it is. If it's a meeting, you go in and you go in with the energy of contribution. You don't go in with the energy of engage me, make me laugh, monkey man, right? It's not that shit, right? You go in already with professionalism. Go
mm,
with the right energy. Go with the right energy. Um, the other example we often say is like, never ever have a bad day. Choose not to have bad days. You have bad moments, but don't let that pollute the entire day. Make your energetic choice.
yeah, yeah.
And
I like
and you
that.
can see people going, oh God, I didn't think about that. Yeah, you choose your energy. Choose
Mm,
it. Choose it.
mm.
Choose it wisely. So it's physiology, auditory, visual aids, energy, relationship, and story. These are the elements of our delivery. And in the book, we go through each one of those in detail with the techniques that can allow you to be effective as a communicator and a person of influence.
Colin, you have been absolutely brilliant.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. No, I really appreciate it. And want to encourage everyone out there to go out, grab a copy of the book. You can pick it up from Amazon. There'll be a link in the show notes as well for you to grab a copy of that. So, Colin, thank you so much again for joining us.
Thank you, Lee.
I forgot to ask, how can people best reach out to you?
They can email me at colin@colinjames.com.au.
Yep.
LinkedIn is another place. And of course, our website, which is colinjames.com.au.
Okay, we'll get those in the show notes too, guys, so check it out there. And until next time, live more fully, have more meaning, and find more joy. We'll talk soon. Bye for now.
Thanks, Lee.